Hello, gorgeous Silcana coaches. Here are some warm-ups that we're doing this cycle around shoulder, thoracic spine, and deadlift prep. The first, we've done this before. I'm calling it a spiral press. So Hannah does a version called a teacup press. It's basically where you would imagine you're holding a teacup, and we could do something like this, where we would flip it kind of quickly and then come through. That's more of the teacup vibe, where we're using sort of centrifugal force to make the tea not spill. The spiral press, as I do it, is a little different. So you could use a light plate, although I wouldn't recommend people start there because if you drop this, it may hit you on the head. So another way to approach it is to use an ab mat or something less critical. But this can be kind of big, especially depending on people's mobility and the size of their body to get through. So you could also just imagine a teacup. So we're going to take this teacup through this range of motion without spilling it. I'm going to start with a hip hinge. That gives me space to come under. Then I'm getting into something that looks a little bit like a bent press. So I am swiveling my hips to the side as I'm pressing up through shoulder extension. I'm going to come all the way through this overhead position, and then I'm going to bring it down in front. I realize I got out of frame. Here's what that might look like with a yoga block. Hinge, bent press, side press, overhead. So I'm hitting some different shoulder positions, and I could reverse that potentially, taking that sort of windmill-like approach, coming into this like shoulder extension position, down through the middle. So I feel like it makes the most sense if I think about hinging first and taking it through this window, and then from there, can I only kind of go one way. So there it is with the yoga block. Again, you could use a light plate, but it is very possible to drop this, and you would not want anyone to drop even a very light plate on their own neck or head. Pull over on a block. So we're going to be thinking about extending the thoracic spine. So here my thoracic spine is kyphotic, it is flexed. So if I'm thinking of extending this thoracic spine, it's opening up through the chest and extending the spine between the shoulder blades. So just a pullover is a great exercise for that. So I have a dumbbell just holding it by the ends, and I'm just allowing the dumbbell to lower me to this overhead position. I can have my head straight down. The thing that we want to have people avoid is arching through the low back. So if someone is short of overhead position, they might go to here and then allow the low back to come up. So we want to encourage core activation to hold the back nice and neutral. So there's one option. And even if they don't go all the way to the floor, that is okay. Another option is to get varying sized things under the low back, ideally somewhat rounded. So here I have an ab mat. That's just going to take my upper back into some extension. So I still, and maybe even have to work harder to keep my core on so that my low back doesn't also extend. So I'm thinking about being active through the core, squeezing up. And I'm also thinking about keeping my chin tucked a little bit, because I could be reaching my head back to sort of have my neck do what I'm trying to have my upper back do. So squeezing down on both points will ensure that I'm opening through the thoracic spine, which is made to extend. The low back is not as made to extend. So let's say I can do that, which I can. I have some other options. I have this thin foam roller, I have a foam block, foam roller, kind of going right between the shoulder blades. Same thing. I can get my arms straight all the way to the floor. For someone who could not, they would still have the option of getting close and hanging and just controlling that. That's still going to help. So I can take myself all the way to foam roller, and here I am having to hold my head up a bit, but I still don't want to be like really curved through my neck. I'm thinking more about tucking my chin, stretching along through the top of the head. A light weight is going to be all I need to extend my upper back through that overhead position. Oh yeah, so this is kind of like doing a good morning or an RDL for your hamstrings, but we're doing it for both like lengthening lats and also extending the upper back. So as a pullover with a block for thoracic spine extension. Good morning. So we have our good morning, as I just talked about, lengthening the hamstrings with a neutral spine. So we're basically going to do that with a banded distraction. So a distraction is usually a bad thing. In this case, we are using the term distraction to mean traction that is taking us distally or away from the center of the body. It is making room in this hip capsule. So if I get my band on very high, you can use a fairly thick band, and then if I step away, this opens up my hip socket. So from here, I'm just slightly leaned from my ankles, so I don't want to be leaning from my hips, leaning slightly from the ankles, and working through that same range of motion as a good morning. That's it. We can do some different variations of this. We can turn away slightly, and that's going to actually pull the hip socket back this way. That can also feel good, so that can be a variation. Doing this direction, it's not going to be doing all that much for us, but straight off to the side, or straight back, or somewhere sort of in between those are good places to play around with for the good morning with banded distraction. Reverse fly with palms up. So normally when I think of a bent over reverse fly, I think of getting back pretty parallel to the floor, squeezing shoulders and blades together, and then bringing elbows and backs of hands up for this like total upper back activation. So with palms up, I'm thinking turning palms out to start and squeezing back a little bit. I'm still getting a lot of upper back, but this is engaging lats a lot more. We could also do this from standing and just think about squeezing shoulder blades together and then pushing back as if we were pushing against a wall or something. In fact, you could have people stand against the wall, squeeze shoulder blades together, touch the wall, relax. Adding the bent over component just makes it a little bit more like what we're doing in our deadlift, as well as we have gravity working against the arms to make it just a little more challenging. Very light plates could be used to increase the challenge of this. Also, we don't necessarily have to do like big full reps. We can, especially if we're trying to teach ourselves to squeeze shoulders into neutral and then extend at the shoulder versus like diving the shoulder forward at the top. So we could do that kind of big full rep. We can also do some pulses towards the top. That's going to get at the value of it without as much time in between. Finally, banded lockout is talking about lengthening of hamstrings. The banded lockout is a really good method for that. I am face up, getting the band around the center of the foot, pulling toes down towards my face is going to help stretch this entire posterior part of my leg. And people are going to start wherever they're at. So if my hamstrings are really tight, I'll be out here. If my hamstrings are a little bit more anatomically normal-ish, I'm going to be more like straight up. I'm just going to pull my knee towards my shoulder and then squeeze, locking the quad. Release, lock. Thus the term lockout. Ideally, over the course of doing this, I'm able to move a few degrees towards my face, lengthening the hamstring. So there should be a slight feeling of stretch, release, pressing heel up. So I should be able to crank out a whole bunch of these. And the idea is that each time I activate my quads, it's sending a strong signal to the hamstring to release. So I'm not like jerking into the stretch. My goal with this is to activate the quads over and over and over and over. So if I write something like 24 per side, that shouldn't take all that long. It should be like on, off, on, off, on, off, on, off, on, off. You get it. You get it. There you go. A very good way to make people see how useful that is do 24 on one side, do a good morning, and oh my gosh, even though I was just sort of playing around demonstrating, I feel like amazing on this side and really tight on this side. So I'll go do the other side, and then that's just a little way that test retest to show people how useful something like that can be. Have fun with these amazing warm-ups.